There will be a city on Mars, not as a symbol, not as a flag planted in dust, but as a functioning place where humans wake up, work, and survive. Not someday in science fiction, but within a time frame that can already be calculated. This is no longer a question of imagination, but of execution. The year most often mentioned is 2050. By then, Mars is expected to host a permanent human settlement. Not a research outpost, not a temporary base, but a second home for our species. A place designed to exist without Earth. This ambition is not driven by curiosity alone. It is driven by fragility. Everything humanity has built depends on a single planet. And history has shown how dangerous that dependency can be. SpaceX does not frame Mars as an adventure. It frames it as insurance. A backup for civilization itself. A way to ensure that humanity does not end with one global failure. But building a city on Mars is not about rockets alone. Transportation is only the first problem. The real challenge begins after landing, when no supply ship is coming to save you. Unlike the moon, Mars does not forgive dependence. A trip to the moon takes days. A return is always within reach. Mars is different. Even with advanced propulsion, the journey takes months. In the best future scenarios, it may still take weeks. That distance changes everything. It turns survival into a closed system. People on Mars cannot rely on Earth for daily needs. They cannot import water, food, fuel, or oxygen in meaningful quantities. They must extract, produce, and recycle everything locally. Self-sufficiency is not optional, it is the foundation. This is what separates a Martian city from every space station before it. The goal is not endurance. The goal is independence, a place that continues even if Earth goes silent. To reach that point, scale matters. A handful of astronauts is not enough. A city must reach a critical mass before Earth-based support becomes irrelevant. The number often cited is 1 million people. That number is not symbolic. It reflects redundancy, specialization, and resilience. A society large enough to absorb failure. A population capable of sustaining itself. But before humans arrive, something else must go first. Robots. Not as assistants, but as pioneers. The first builders of a planet-wide construction site. Mars will likely host dozens, possibly hundreds of autonomous machines before the first human steps onto its surface. They will prepare the environment, build infrastructure, and reduce risk. Their work will determine whether humans live or die. This is not exploration, it is preparation. One robot stands at the center of this plan. A humanoid machine designed to work where humans cannot. Able to operate tools, follow instructions, and adapt to unfamiliar environments. A machine built not for Earth, but for places like Mars. The distance makes this necessary. Mars is too far, too cold, and too hostile for improvisation. You cannot send people first and hope for solutions later. Every mistake would be fatal. Mars is colder than Antarctica, drier than the Sahara. Its atmosphere is so thin that liquid water cannot survive on the surface. Pressure alone makes unprotected human life impossible. Without a pressurized suit, the human body would fail instantly. Fluids would boil. Oxygen would vanish. Radiation would penetrate tissue without resistance. Even inside protective suits, danger remains. Mars lacks a magnetic shield. Solar radiation reaches the surface almost unfiltered. Long-term exposure threatens life at the cellular level. This is why the first starships to Mars are expected to carry machines, not people. Optimistically, this could happen as early as 2026. Multiple ships will be sent at once, not for redundancy, but for learning. The objective of the first mission is simple: land successfully, nothing more. Survival comes later. SpaceX does not avoid failure. It learns from it. Explosions are part of the process. Iteration is built into the plan. Once a landing succeeds, the second phase begins. Robots are deployed onto Martian soil. They wait, because real construction requires scale. Roughly 2 years later, a larger fleet is expected to arrive. Dozens of ships carrying massive amounts of cargo. Most of it infrastructure. Not comfort, not luxury, but survival systems. Location now becomes critical. Not every place on Mars is equal. Water, sunlight, and terrain determine everything. SpaceX has focused on one region in particular. Arcadia Planitia lies near the Martian equator, close enough to receive consistent sunlight, yet believed to contain large reserves of subsurface ice, water in frozen form beneath the ground. Water is the most valuable resource on Mars, not just for drinking, but for breathing, fuel, and protection. It is the backbone of every system. Extracting that water is the first industrial task. Ice must be mined, melted, purified, and recycled. Transporting water from Earth is unrealistic. Mars must supply its own. Water serves multiple roles at once. Split into hydrogen and oxygen, it becomes air and fuel. Oxygen supports life. Hydrogen supports return flights. Fuel production is essential, even for a one-way settlement. Early settlers will want the option to return. A city without fuel is a trap. Self-produced propellant keeps choices open. SpaceX has already chosen its fuel strategy. Not pure hydrogen, but methane. More stable, easier to store, easier to handle, and perfectly suited to Mars. Mars offers carbon dioxide in abundance. Its thin atmosphere is mostly made of it. Extract carbon, combine it with hydrogen from water. Methane is produced. This process does more than fuel rockets. It creates oxygen as a byproduct. Breathing air emerges from chemistry. Survival becomes engineering. To support this system, mining must expand. Ice lies underground. Rock must be moved. The surface must be reshaped. Large-scale tunneling machines are impractical at first, but smaller, adapted versions can operate. Drilling, hauling, processing, all performed by machines. Nothing is wasted. Excavated soil becomes construction material, compressed, processed, and reused. Landing pads, roads, foundations. About 2 years after large-scale robotic construction begins, humans arrive. This could be as early as 2030, a fleet unlike anything before it, carrying hundreds of tons per ship. Their first tasks are not exploration, they are activation, turning systems on, keeping them running. Power becomes the next bottleneck. Robots survived on limited solar energy. Humans require far more. Life support never sleeps. Mars days are similar to Earth days. Roughly 12 hours of sunlight. Then darkness. Energy storage becomes critical. Large battery systems fill this gap. Charged during the day. Discharged at night. Keeping oxygen flowing, water cycling, pressure stable. Shelter follows. Starships themselves serve as temporary homes. They are safe, sealed, and functional, but not designed for permanence. Long-term habitats must be built. Not tall, narrow structures, but wide, protected spaces, shielded from radiation. Glass domes are often imagined, but they are impractical at scale. Heavy, fragile, resource-intensive. Mars demands different thinking. One alternative uses ice itself. Ice domes built from Martian water, transparent enough for light, dense enough to block radiation. Water is an excellent radiation shield. Frozen, it insulates, it protects, it stabilizes temperature. Inflatable cores provide shape. Robots spray water layer by layer. Ice hardens into structure. A habitat forms. For larger facilities, modular systems work better. Inflatable habitats covered with local materials. Rock and processed soil create solid shells. Strength without import. Even human waste becomes valuable. Filtered and processed, it binds soil, creating bioconcrete stronger than Earth-based versions. Nothing is discarded. Food remains the final challenge. Martian soil is toxic. Perchlorates prevent plant growth. Agriculture must be engineered. Either soil is processed or farming moves indoors. Hydroponics, artificial environments, closed-loop ecosystems. Every solution feeds another system. Waste becomes fertilizer. Heat becomes energy. Scarcity becomes design. If power, water, air, shelter, and food can be produced locally, then the city becomes real, not symbolic, but alive. This is not a fantasy of comfort. It is a plan for survival, a second foothold for humanity, built one system at a time. Once the first humans arrive, Mars stops being a destination and starts becoming a place. Not a frontier to visit, but an environment to endure. Life there will not resemble life on Earth in any romantic way. It will be structured, constrained, and relentlessly practical. The earliest settlers are not explorers in the traditional sense. They are operators, engineers, technicians, doctors, and system managers. People trained to maintain stability, not chase discovery. Every day on Mars begins with a checklist. Atmospheric pressure, oxygen levels, radiation exposure, power reserves. If one system fails, everything else follows. Routine becomes survival. Outside activity is limited. Mars is not walked casually. Every step outside a habitat requires preparation. Suits are heavy, movement slow, mistakes unforgiving. Even with advanced suits, exposure time is controlled. Radiation accumulates silently. Dust damages seals and joints. The planet erodes both machines and people. Because of this, much of Martian life happens underground. Habitats are buried or shielded. Windows are rare, carefully positioned, heavily protected. The sky exists mostly as data. Psychologically, this changes everything. Humans evolved under open skies. On Mars, the horizon is sealed. Distance becomes abstract. Days follow a strict rhythm. Work, maintenance, monitoring, rest. There is little room for spontaneity. Chaos is not tolerated. Social structures adapt quickly. Hierarchy is functional, not symbolic. Authority belongs to competence. Trust is earned through reliability. Conflict is dangerous. There is no space for prolonged disagreement. Problems must be resolved efficiently. Emotions are acknowledged, but never allowed to destabilize systems. Privacy becomes rare. Living quarters are compact. Shared spaces dominate. Isolation is a luxury that cannot be afforded. Over time, a new culture emerges. Not one defined by freedom, but by responsibility. Every individual understands their role in collective survival. Identity is tied to function. Children, when they eventually arrive, grow up differently. They never experience Earth gravity. Their bodies adapt to Mars. Returning to Earth may be impossible. This creates the first true divergence of humanity. Not ideological, biological. A branch shaped by environment. Education on Mars is utilitarian. Physics before poetry. Engineering before art. Knowledge that keeps systems running comes first. Yet culture does not disappear. It compresses. Music, stories, rituals adapt to limited space and resources. Meaning finds new forms. Celebrations are rare but intense. A successful harvest. A system upgrade completed. A year without critical failures. Time itself feels different. Mars days are slightly longer than Earth days. Mars years are nearly twice as long. Age is measured differently. Connection to Earth remains, but delayed. Messages take minutes to arrive. Conversations cannot be spontaneous. Silence fills the gaps. This delay changes relationships. Earth becomes memory, not presence. News arrives late, stripped of urgency. Mars becomes emotionally self-contained. Over generations, the idea of Earth shifts, from home to origin, from necessity to reference. Mars becomes normal. The city expands slowly, not outward, but inward. More layers, more tunnels, more redundancy. Growth favors resilience over aesthetics. Leadership evolves as well. Charisma matters less than consistency. Decisions are conservative by design. Risk is calculated ruthlessly. This does not make Mars stagnant. It makes it focused. Innovation exists to reduce fragility. Every improvement is tested against survival. Failures still happen. Machines break. Systems degrade. But response is immediate. There is no panic, only procedure. Mars teaches emotional discipline, because panic kills. Over time, settlers stop seeing themselves as pioneers. They are citizens of a place that cannot forgive mistakes, of a world that demands respect. This psychological shift is critical. A city cannot be sustained by heroism. It survives through routine, through people who show up every day and keep things working. Mars, in this sense, is not humanity's escape. It is humanity's test, a measure of whether we can live without excess, without safety nets. If a city can survive there, then civilization has learned something essential, not how to conquer planets, but how to sustain itself. And that lesson will matter far beyond Mars. Once survival is stabilized, a harder question emerges. How does a city on Mars function beyond staying alive? Not as a mission, but as a society. Not as a project, but as an economy. On Earth, cities grow around trade. Resources move in, products move out. Value is created through exchange. Mars breaks this model completely. Nothing arrives cheaply. Every kilogram transported from Earth carries enormous cost. Importing everyday goods is unsustainable. Mars must create value locally, or not at all. This forces a radical rethink of economics. Traditional markets do not apply. Scarcity is absolute. Efficiency becomes the only currency. In the early stages, money is largely symbolic. Food, oxygen, power, and maintenance override price. Contribution matters more than ownership. Work is not optional. Everyone on Mars is employed, not by choice, but by necessity. Idle labor is a liability. Every person must justify their presence through function. This does not mean exploitation. It means alignment. Roles are assigned based on capability and need. Status follows responsibility. As the city grows, specialization increases. Not everyone maintains life support systems. Some design improvements. Some train others. Knowledge becomes the most valuable asset. Not patents, but understanding. Tacit knowledge about machines, systems, and failures. Things that cannot be written down fully. This creates a new form of inequality. Not based on wealth, but on irreplaceability. Those who understand critical systems gain influence. Not politically, but structurally. Leadership on Mars is pragmatic. Decisions are evaluated by consequence, not ideology. There is no room for symbolism. Only outcomes matter. Governance becomes procedural. Rules exist to prevent cascading failure. Debate is allowed, delay is not. Consensus is less important than continuity. This may sound authoritarian, but it is not driven by control. It is driven by environment. Mars does not negotiate. Mistakes carry immediate cost, not financial, but existential. A miscalculation can threaten everyone. Accountability is absolute. Over time, a distinct political culture forms, less emotional, more technical, focused on system health rather than individual expression. This does not eliminate disagreement. It reframes it. Arguments revolve around data, not values. Evidence matters more than persuasion. As population increases, governance scales carefully, not through expansion of authority, but through modular systems. Neighborhoods become semi-autonomous units. Failure in one does not doom all. Redundancy becomes the organizing principle. Multiple power grids, independent life support loops, decentralized decision-making within strict constraints. This architecture is not accidental. It mirrors the logic of spacecraft design. No single point of failure, no dependence without backup. Over time, Mars develops an economy of maintenance. Repair, optimization, and adaptation dominate labor. Innovation focuses on reducing risk, not maximizing growth. Growth itself is treated cautiously. Every new person increases strain. Every expansion requires justification. Sustainability overrides ambition. This makes Mars resistant to rapid change. Trends do not spread easily. Experiments are isolated before adoption. Stability is preserved. From Earth's perspective, this looks slow. From Mars, it looks responsible. Different environments produce different values. There is no universal model. Trade with Earth remains limited but strategic. Mars exports knowledge, not goods. Techniques for closed-loop living. Systems for extreme resilience. These ideas influence Earth in return. Sustainable cities. Efficient resource use. Infrastructure designed for failure, not perfection. In this way, Mars becomes a laboratory, not for science alone, but for governance under constraint, for civilization under pressure. Over decades, this influence grows. Earth begins to borrow Martian logic, resilience over convenience, redundancy over optimization. The city on Mars was never meant to replace Earth. It was meant to teach it what matters when everything else is stripped away, what survives when comfort disappears. Mars forces honesty. You cannot outsource consequences. You cannot ignore physics. You cannot vote away reality. And that may be its greatest contribution. Not a new planet to live on, but a new way to think about living at all. As the city grows, a question that cannot be engineered away begins to surface. Who gets to go to Mars? Not in theory, but in practice. Not someday, but now. Seats on a starship are not just transportation. They are access to survival beyond Earth. Every selection is a decision about the future of humanity, and that weight cannot be ignored. In the early phases, selection is simple. Skills determine eligibility. Engineers, doctors, system specialists, people whose absence would weaken the mission. But as the city stabilizes, the criteria become less clear. Not everyone can be essential. Not everyone can be accommodated. Scarcity forces exclusion. This is where ethics collide with logistics. Mars cannot accept refugees at scale. It cannot absorb Earth's problems. It can barely sustain its own. So rules emerge, quietly, without public debate. Because debate implies choice, and choice is limited. Mars does not promise equality. It promises survival under constraint. Those who go are selected, not invited. And selection is never neutral. This creates tension on Earth. Public imagination turns Mars into escape, a second chance, a way out. But the reality is colder. Mars is not a refuge for the many. It is a responsibility for the few. And that distinction matters. Those chosen carry more than luggage. They carry expectation. The idea that they represent humanity's future, a burden that does not disappear after landing. On Mars, this pressure is felt immediately. Every action is observed. Every failure is amplified. Because the margin for error is thin. Social trust becomes fragile, not because people are uncooperative, but because consequences are shared. One mistake affects everyone. This forces a different moral framework. Individual freedom exists, but only within system safety. Personal risk becomes collective risk, and collective risk is unacceptable. Over time, Martian society internalizes this logic. Ethics become operational. Good is what preserves stability. Wrong is what threatens it. From Earth's perspective, this can appear harsh. Wow. Rules seem strict. Choices seem limited. But Mars does not allow moral abstraction. There is no room for symbolic gestures, no space for protest that interrupts systems, no tolerance for behavior that endangers infrastructure. Survival overrides expression. This does not erase humanity. It reshapes it. Compassion becomes responsibility. Care becomes maintenance. Families form carefully. Children are planned deliberately. Population growth is controlled. Life is valued precisely because it is fragile. Death, when it happens, is communal, not sensational, not hidden. Acknowledged, recorded, learned from. Every loss becomes data. This can sound bleak, but for those living it, it becomes normal. Mars does not feel oppressive, it feels honest. Earth, by contrast, begins to feel chaotic, wasteful, unaccountable. A place where consequences are delayed or displaced. This contrast creates a psychological divide. Martians and Earthborn humans begin to think differently, not better or worse, just shaped by different realities. As generations pass, this gap widens. Mars develops its own identity, not rebellious, but distinct, not separate, but no longer dependent. The idea of return fades. Earth becomes ancestral. Mars becomes home. Belonging shifts. At this point, the city is no longer a project. It is a society with its own ethics, its own limits, its own definition of progress. And this is the moment Earth must confront an uncomfortable truth. The future of humanity may not be unified. It may branch, not by ideology, but by environment. Mars forces a question with no easy answer. Do we want survival at any cost, or comfort with risk? Can both coexist? There is no resolution yet. Only tension, only adaptation, only time. And Mars continues to grow. As Mars becomes a permanent human environment, another shift takes place. The question is no longer how to survive there. It becomes how to remain human while doing so. And this question has no technical solution. Life on Mars is efficient, but efficiency carries a cost. Every action is optimized. Every resource is measured. Nothing is done without justification. Over time, this logic shapes behavior. People learn to think in systems, to evaluate consequences before emotions, to pause instinct in favor of procedure. This makes Martian society resilient, but it also makes it restrained. Spontaneity fades. Risk-taking becomes rare. Art still exists, but it changes form. Large performances are impractical. Materials are scarce. Expression becomes subtle, compact, internal. Stories gain importance, not as entertainment, but as memory. Earth becomes mythology, a place of oceans, forests, and excess. Children born on Mars grow up with these stories. They know Earth as a concept, not an experience. Gravity there sounds oppressive. Weather sounds violent. For them, Mars feels normal. Low gravity is familiar. Artificial skies are expected. Life inside systems is all they have known. This creates a generational divide. The first settlers remember Earth viscerally. Later generations understand it intellectually. The emotional connection weakens. With that weakening comes independence. Mars stops defining itself in relation to Earth. It stops waiting for approval. It stops mirroring old models. Language shifts subtly. Terms related to Earth lose relevance. New expressions emerge, shaped by local reality. Culture adapts to constraint. Governance also evolves. Early rules were strict out of necessity. Later rules become tradition. Systems harden into norms. This is where risk returns, quietly. What was once adaptive can become dogma. What was once protection can become limitation. Stability can turn into stagnation. Some Martians begin to question this, not openly, not dramatically, but through small deviations, through experiments at the edges. They ask whether efficiency must always dominate, whether comfort can coexist with safety. whether growth can be more than controlled expansion. These questions are not welcomed easily. Change threatens balance. Balance is survival, and survival remains sacred. Earth watches this from afar, with fascination, with unease. Mars is no longer an extension of Earth's future, but a parallel one. Two civilizations now exist under the same species, one shaped by abundance, one shaped by scarcity, each convinced its logic is correct. Trade between them becomes philosophical as much as material. Earth sends culture, Mars sends methods. Each influences the other indirectly. Mars teaches Earth how to live with limits. Earth reminds Mars why limits were challenged in the first place. The tension never resolves. It evolves. The city on Mars continues to expand, layer by layer, system by system, generation by generation. No flags dominate its skyline. No monuments declare victory. Its success is measured quietly, by continuity, and perhaps that is its true achievement. Not proving humanity can conquer another planet, but proving it can adapt without collapsing. That it can persist under pressure. Mars was never meant to be paradise. It was meant to be possible, a place where the future could exist at all, even if it looks nothing like the past. This is the legacy of building a city on Mars. Not escape, not dominance, but endurance. And endurance, in the end, may be the most human trait of all. At a certain point, the question of Mars stops being about Mars itself. It turns back toward Earth, toward a civilization that now knows it is no longer alone in shaping humanity's future. And that realization changes everything. For the first time in history, failure on Earth is no longer absolute. Not because Mars can save Earth, but because humanity has proven it can exist elsewhere. Extinction is no longer a single point of collapse. This knowledge is subtle but powerful. It alters how leaders calculate risk, how societies think about long-term consequences, how fragile the planet suddenly feels. Earth begins to see itself differently, not as the center of human existence, but as the birthplace, a place that must now be preserved, not taken for granted. Ironically, Mars makes Earth more valuable, because once humanity leaves, even partially, the idea of home becomes clearer. Earth is no longer infinite. It is irreplaceable. The city on Mars does not compete with Earth. It reflects it. Every flaw in Martian systems exposes a weakness in human nature. Every success highlights what discipline can achieve. Mars becomes a mirror without mercy. It shows what happens when waste is impossible, when denial is fatal, when optimism must be backed by engineering. This reflection forces a cultural reckoning. Growth for growth's sake looks irresponsible. Comfort without resilience looks fragile. Short-term thinking looks dangerous. Some lessons are embraced, others are ignored. Change on Earth remains slow, political, conflicted. Mars does not judge, it simply continues. As decades pass, the idea of first city on Mars loses its novelty. It becomes infrastructure, routine, background reality. Children on Earth grow up knowing humans live on another planet, not as science fiction, as fact, as something unremarkable. This normalization may be the most profound shift of all, because it expands the boundaries of what feels possible. Once Mars exists, other limits feel negotiable. Not easy, but reachable. The city itself keeps evolving. Materials improve. Habitats expand. Life becomes less fragile, though never easy. Mars remains unforgiving. But humanity learns how to live inside that truth, not by dominating the planet, but by respecting its constraints. And this is where the narrative settles. Not in triumph, not in disaster, but in continuity. Building a city on Mars was never about proving intelligence. It was about proving restraint. The ability to operate within limits without collapsing into chaos. The ability to carry civilization, not just bodies, across space. Mars does not promise salvation. It offers perspective. A second reference point for what humanity is and what it could become. A reminder that survival is a choice repeated every day. The city stands quietly under a thin sky. Machines hum. People work. Life continues. No speeches echo across the red dust. No final chapter closes the story. Because this is not an ending. It is a branch, a divergence, a controlled risk taken by a species that finally understood what was at stake. And somewhere between Earth and Mars, humanity learns a difficult truth. The future is not something we reach, it is something we maintain.